Hi, and welcome to transitioning to the new UCF budget model. Thank you for having an interest in the new model that we're getting ready to implement at the university. My name is Rebecca Richards. I'm the Assistant Vice President for Academic Budget Planning and Administration. And I'm here today with Sean from the Central Budget Office, and I'll let him introduce himself.
Hello, I'm Sean Simmons. I'm the Director of Financial Planning and Analysis in the Central Budget Office.
Thank you, Sean. And we're here today to go ahead and talk about, give you some insight into what will be the UCF budget model moving forward and how this differs from our current model. We're going to provide some information on changes to our processes and governance, and to give some information around stakeholder engagement and support. So with that, let's go ahead and get started with the why. Next slide. So in order to understand the why UCF needed to reconsider a new budget model, we really need to understand what model we live in today. UCF is currently on an incremental budget model, which really means that everybody receives a base budget and investment decisions are made on marginal revenues. This type of model really restricts the university's ability to plan strategically, and it limits our ability to direct significant resources to initiatives of greater impact. At UCF, we realized that we needed something that offered better transparency and provided more flexibility around our resource allocation. So to that end, around October of 2019, we convened a steering committee that was made up of deans, faculty members, and administrative staff to really take a look at what would be most appropriate to help UCF move forward. And this is where we landed. The steering committee, in conjunction with Huron, proposed an incentive-based model for the university. An incentive-based model that is focused on aligning our budget allocations with the university's goals. The new model will use financial data to inform our future budgetary and financial decisions, which will help provide an increased level of transparency and predictability. The new model introduces 4 elements to the university. These elements are the organizational framework, which really takes the different units throughout the university and puts them into separate buckets, if you will, and I'll speak about those in more detail in just a second. The next concept is the devolution of revenue. In our current world, we collect all revenues centrally and we allocate spending authority based on decisions that have been made in the past. With the new incentive-based model, we will be allocating revenues to the units that are earning the revenue. So there's going to be an allocation formula for tuition and state appropriation that is different from what we've done in the past. It also introduces the allocation of costs. The allocation of costs is intended to allocate the university's central support costs as indirect costs to the colleges, who are the revenue generators. Rather than charging each unit for specific use, the cost will be allocated back to the colleges using a metric that really reflects a unit of use. These metrics are things such as faculty headcount, total headcount, undergraduate or graduate FTEs, and unweighted space assigned. The final element that's being introduced with the new budget model is the use of the subvention pools. The purpose of the subvention pool is twofold. It will be used to help support mission-critical activities of the university and will help the provost continue to make strategic investments into the academic enterprise. I will provide additional information on how the pool will be funded in just a couple of slides. So here you can see the different buckets, if you will, of how the units are going to be categorized. The academic section is made up of the 11 academic colleges. The primary focus of these units is teaching and research, and they're considered revenue generating units. The next bucket is the self-support bucket. These are units that are primarily traditional auxiliaries, such as housing, parking, and student health. These units are expected to generate sufficient revenue to cover their own costs. The other bucket is the central support units. These are units whose primary focus is supporting the academic and administrative functions of campus and are not revenue generating. The next slide talks about the participation fee. This is how we will fund the subvention pool. There will be a fee assessed to revenue generating units and will be used to help us invest in mission critical activities that may not generate sufficient revenue to offset their costs. As of today, the participation fee rate is 18%, but we do expect that as the budget model continues to mature, that participation fee will decrease. Now I'm going to pass the torch to Sean, who will walk us through the differences in processes and governance and provide additional information on stakeholder engagement.
Thank you, Rebecca. And so with the new process, we out with the old and in with the new. And so as we look at where our current challenges sit, the way the current process works right now is that the state revenues and the tuition and fees are all pulled into a centrally held resource pool. And then those resources are then allocated out to the individual units based off their prior year base budgets, as Rebecca had previously stated in her slides. And so then as we look at the then and now, the current budget process, we operate off the base budget, and then the adjustments to revenue dictate whether or not the budgets are going to go up or down in a given year. Under this process, there's very little transparency and very little collaboration across the different units. And so now we're going to be moving towards our new process. This new process will be facilitated in the new adaptive planning tool, where we'll be able to implement the budget model. This provides for greater transparency through an enhanced governance structure and provides for a structure for greater collaboration. Also, probably the most important and exciting feature of this is that the revenue generating units will have much greater control of their budgets. So if we move on to the next slide here, we can see what the governance structure is going to look like. This structure is put in place to ensure that the goals of the new budget model are met. The overarching governance structure is there to oversee the budget process established. And as you can see on the slides there are many different areas of campus involved in overseeing this process. This is how it provides the mechanism to have a greater collaborative budgeting approach to better serve UCF. And as we move on to the next slide, what we can see is the budget process overview. So with the new model, the timeline of how we do budgeting is going to have to change. As you can see, the budgeting process is going to start much earlier in the process for many of the units. And one thing that's very important is that more parties are involved given the new governance structure. And so we will be starting the process in the September timeframe where we'll be kicking off some of the forecasting and revenue projections for the upcoming year. And it will culminate in May, where we get a final budget, which will then be presented to the Board of Trustees for their approval. With this new process, though, one of the more important features of what we're going to have to be putting into place is to be constantly forecasting our revenues and expenses so that we can really be adaptive and be able to have the flexibility in place to better serve the campus. And so if we move on to the next slide, the budget timeline. So although this new model is going to into effect shortly here in July, the model has actually been under development with input from stakeholders across campus since mid-2019. The culmination of this 2-year activity is going to go into effect on our go live on July 1st of 2021. We're currently running the parallel process where we are making the final minor adjustments to the model to make sure that we really have something that's better serving UCF. And so the official go live is coming up here very shortly on July 1st. The model will be live, but campus leadership has decided that in FY22, we'll have a hold harmless period, which will help the stakeholders to better understand and prepare for the financial impacts, whether they be positive or negative in the new model. And so as we move in for the campus engagement and the support, we have a lot of different processes that we've established to make sure that this transition is as easy as possible. And so we have various training opportunities that are going to be both in person and online in various manners, along with some printed communications. And also training for the new budget model will also include instruction and guidance on the new adaptive planning tool where the model will be facilitated. And so some of the next steps that we're going to be, that everyone needs to start to take into mind is everyone should view the Getting Started with the Adaptive Planning video. That will have a link below this video here. You should also work with your unit's budget officer for additional information. And finally, we recommend 2 web courses, The Colors of Money and Expenditures of 101. And finally, we have some more information. An area where you should become familiar with is the Budget Model website, which is linked at the very top here. Again, consult with your unit's budget officer, and then also the financial service desk, which has the email and the phone number below there, which are all resources that you can take advantage of. And so with that, we'd like to thank you for viewing this video here. We are very excited about this new process that we're going to be putting in place, and we really think it's going to be something that is going to transform UCF into the future here.
Thank you all for joining us today.